So today we are opening up the file on a mind that was just so expansive, so ambitious, that it basically built the foundation for, well, almost every field of Western knowledge.
It really did.
We're talking about Aristotle, who lived from 384 to 322 BC. He wasn't just another philosopher, he was like the great organizer of reality, a foundational thinker who, maybe a bit unfairly, sometimes gets overshadowed by his teacher, Plato.
Well, the sources you shared, they paint this stunning picture as not just about his ideas, but about his a truly dramatic life. And our mission in this deep dive is really to connect those two things.
Okay.
To figure out how his closeness to power, his personal friendships, and his deep-seated skepticism really shaped his systematic, you could almost say scientific approach to the world. We need to pull out the most surprising nuggets.
Absolutely, because when you look at Aristotle, you're not just looking at abstract ideas. You're looking at the person who kind of invented the instruction manual for thinking.
That is the core of it, yes. He's the founder of formal logic, syllogisms, which for 2,000 years was the way you made a valid argument. And beyond that, he basically drew the maps for fields we now call physics, biology, ethics, political science.
He did it all.
He was the ultimate synthesizer, always trying to sort of balance the idealism of Greek thought with this rigorous, hard-nosed commitment to what you can actually see and observe.
Okay, let's unpack all that. And I think we have to start with the biography, because his life was so deeply tangled up with Macedonian royalty.
It was. Aristotle was born in Stagira, a Greek colony, but his whole destiny was pretty much sealed by his father's job. His father, Nicomachus, was the court physician to King Amyntas III of Macedon.
So from the very beginning, Aristotle has a front row seat to power. He's not some detached academic in an ivory tower. He's literally growing up at court side by side with Philip, the kid who would become King Philip II.
Right.
That kind of inside knowledge of how power works, how people behave, that had to have colored every single political theory he came up with later.
It gave him a context nobody else had. And then, tragically, he's orphaned at about 15. But he inherits a fortune, and his guardian, a man named Proxenus, gives him this gift that was worth more than any money.
Which was?
A passion for reading, and the cash to back it up. We have sources that say Proxenus bought him even the rarest, most expensive books. So he had access to this, just encyclopedic knowledge that his peers could only dream of.
So he arrives in Athens at 367 BC, ready to join Plato's academy. And this is where a little accident of history changes everything and explains why he wasn't just a Plato clone.
Yes.
Plato wasn't there.
Exactly. He's off in Sicily on some diplomatic mission for 3 whole years. And that delay, that little bit of chance, it was probably the most important thing for Aristotle's independent development.
Because he wasn't just immediately, sucked into the vortex of Plato's personality.
He wasn't overwhelmed. He got to spend 3 years reading the texts, studying the arguments from other schools, really getting a critical handle on everything before the master's charisma could just sweep him away.
And that critical distance seems like it stuck with him. I mean, he stayed at the academy for 17 years, but he was always seen as a bit of an outlier. Plato famously called him the mind for his brilliance, but he also said Aristotle needs a bridle.
Right. Suggesting he was just too fast, too independent, maybe a little too quick to challenge the rules. Unlike Xenocrates, who Plato said needed spurs.
And he definitely didn't fit that stereotype of the scruffy philosopher, did he?
Not at all. The sources say he was wealthy, well-dressed, sophisticated. And he didn't like being told how to live his life. He enjoyed fine living, and his relationships with women were quite open, which definitely raised some eyebrows in Athens.
But for all that independence and for all his later intellectual disagreements, he eventually rejects Plato's entire theory of forms.
A huge break.
His personal respect for his teacher never wavered. He wrote that he found it heavy for the sake of truth to speak against Plato.
It's that combination of polemic and respect that defines his maturity, really. And that maturity is what leads him straight into his most famous job.
Tutoring the son of King Philip II, tutoring Alexander.
Yes, and you have to hear the context of the invitation. Philip's letter is just. It's incredible. He says he's thankful to the gods, not just that he has a son, but that his son was born in Aristotle's time.
Oh, wow.
Hoping Aristotle would make him worthy of the power he was born to command.
That's a staggering amount of pressure. And Aristotle's curriculum for the young prince, it wasn't abstract philosophy, was it? It was very practical.
Very. It was focused on poetry, specifically Homer's Iliad. He was training Alexander to be an ethical commander, using Achilles as the model for a hero. The goal wasn't a philosopher king, but a king who understood virtue.
And Alexander never forgot it. He had that famous quote, right, that he honored Aristotle as much as his own father.
Exactly. He said he owed his life to his father, but to Aristotle he owed that which gives it price. What makes life worth living?
Now, this is where things get really intense on a personal level. Before he tutored Alexander, Aristotle spent time with his friend Hermias, who was a ruler in Assos. And this friendship, it ended up costing him a lot.
It really did. Hermias was caught negotiating with Philip II and the Persians. They had him betrayed and executed. His last wish, reportedly, was that his friends know he did nothing unworthy of philosophy.
He died with his integrity intact, and Aristotle's reaction to this was just, it was so personal, but also so political.
He married Hermias' sister Pythias to protect her, and he wrote this incredibly beautiful hymn to virtue in his friend's honor, and an epitaph. And that hymn, that poem, would come back to haunt him.
Right, because his enemies later classified it as a paean. Let's stop on that word. Why was calling it a paean so dangerous?
Because a paean was a formal hymn of praise that was reserved strictly for the gods, specifically for Apollo.
Oh.
So by writing this deeply spiritual, praise-filled ode to a mortal man, Hermias, his enemies could accuse him of impiety. It's the exact same crime that got Socrates executed. It was a political hit job disguised as a religious charge.
The cost of loyalty. And that experience links him even closer to Macedon, which eventually leads him back to Athens in 335 BC to start his own school, the Lyceum.
And since he was technically a foreigner, a non-citizen, he had to set it up outside the city walls, near a temple of Apollo Lyceus. And this is where we get the name Peripatetic.
Which we all learn means to walk around, because he taught while walking through the covered galleries, the Peripatos. But is that the full story?
It's the common one, but one of the sources gives this charming little origin story. Apparently the habit started because a young Alexander was always sitting and slouching, and Aristotle just forbade it.
No way.
He made him walk and talk. And Aristotle just sort of adopted the habit himself. So the whole mobile intellectual culture of his school might have started just to fix a teenager's posture.
I love that. And his methods were so meticulous. Difficult subjects in the morning for the advanced students, easier stuff in the evening for the public.
That structure, it really reflects his whole project.
Yeah.
To synthesize everything. He saw these two big intellectual traditions, the physiologists studying nature, and the Socratics focused on know thyself, and he wanted to merge them.
To argue that human thought and the world itself actually coincide.
Exactly. And this is where he builds his empire. He separates knowledge into first philosophy, the abstract principles, and the second philosophy, which is physics, the natural world.
And this is where we get metaphysics.
Right, and the story behind that word is probably the best insight into his whole project. It was basically an accident.
How so?
Well, a few generations later, his student Andronicus of Rhodes was organizing his manuscripts. And this one particular work, it didn't have a title, so he put it on the shelf after the book on physics.
You're kidding. So metaphysics as in the book that comes after the physics.
That's literally it. It wasn't some grand statement. It was a librarian's note that just happened to stick for 2 millennia. But the content of that book, his theory of categories, that's the real revolution.
So what are the categories? Why were they so groundbreaking?
What's so fascinating here is where he got them from. He didn't get them from, staring into the heavens like Plato might have. He got them by analyzing grammar.
Grammar, like the sentence structure.
Exactly. He looked at how people talk, how we structure sentences to describe reality. And he realized the basic components of our language: substance, quality, quantity, relation, place, time. They aren't just words. They are the fundamental structure of reality itself.
So the way we talk about things actually reflects the way things are.
Precisely. It flips the whole Platonic idea on its head.
Yeah.
You don't need some ideal realm of forms. The universal is right here, in the thing itself and in the way we can systematically describe it. For him, form and matter are always inseparable.
But if he gets rid of Plato's forms, how does he explain where all this structure comes from? Where does God fit in?
That's his theology. And if you connect it to the bigger picture, his God is not a creator God who builds the world. He calls God the form of forms, or the prime mover.
The prime mover?
Yes, and this prime mover doesn't act or intervene. It moves the entire universe simply by being an object of desire. Everything in the cosmos is striving towards this perfect, unchanging goal. And that striving is the source of all motion and activity.
That's a huge idea. And he takes that same kind of systematic thinking from the cosmos right down to biology. His work De Anima on the soul just redefines what a soul even is.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
He breaks radically from this idea of the soul as some separate spiritual thing. He creates this tiered system, basically integrating psychology with biology. He argues the soul isn't just for humans.
He gives plants a soul.
Yes, but different kinds of souls. Plants have a nutritive soul. It's for growth, taking in food, and reproduction. That's it.
Okay.
Animals have that, plus a sensitive soul. So they can do sensation, they can move around. And then only humans get the rational soul on top of all that. And the key concept here is entelechy.
Entelechy, that's one of those big Greek words. How do we understand that simply?
The easiest way to think about it is the soul is the function of the body. It's the entelechy, the inner form, that makes a living body actual instead of just a pile of potential matter. It's what a blueprint is to a house, the functionality.
So because the soul is the function of the body, it can't be separated from it.
Exactly. The function of an eye is seeing. If you take away the eye, the seeing disappears. For Aristotle, if you take away the body, the vegetative and animal souls cease to exist. It's an incredibly realistic, almost modern biological view.
So this raises the big question. How does this grounded realism apply to society, to his politics?
His politics are intensely descriptive. He's not trying to build a perfect utopia. He defines man as a zoon politikon. We often translate it as social animal, but it's really political animal.
Meaning we can only be fulfilled inside a community, a polis.
Yes, a community governed by law. And from there, he just analyzes the systems he sees around him. He categorizes constitutions based on who rules and, crucially, for whose benefit.
Right, the good forms versus the bad forms.
Correct. The good forms rule for everyone. Monarchy, that's ruled by one. Aristocracy, ruled by the best. And a moderate democracy or polity. The bad forms are when they rule for themselves. Tyranny, oligarchy, and ochlocracy.
Ochlocracy, rule of the mob.
His biggest fear. He was deeply skeptical of pure democracy from what he saw in Athens. He had this very sarcastic line about how the Athenians discovered wheat and freedom, but they only knew how to use the wheat.
Ouch. They abused freedom.
He thought they abused it quickly. He saw the potential for chaos in it.
And despite everything he gave to Athens, his Macedonian connections came back to bite him in the end, didn't they?
They did. After Alexander the Great dies suddenly in 323 BC, this huge wave of anti-Macedonian anger just erupts in Athens.
And Aristotle is an easy target.
The easiest. He's charged with impiety. And the evidence they use, as we said, is that beautiful poem he wrote for his friend Hermias. They called it a paean to prove he was deifying a mortal man.
But he didn't stay and face the trial like Socrates did.
No, he fled to Chalcis. But he made sure everyone knew why. He famously declared he was leaving so that the Athenians would not commit a crime against philosophy a second time.
A direct and very cutting reference to Socrates.
A parting shot. And then he died just 2 months later in 322 BC from a stomach illness that had run in his family.
It's so interesting that even after he died, his reputation as this obsessive scientist followed him.
Yes, those false rumors that he drowned himself in the Euboean Strait because he couldn't explain the tides. It's not true, of course, but it tells you how people saw him. As a man so driven by curiosity, he would literally die trying to solve a puzzle.
But if we want to find the real man, beyond the philosophy and the politics, the sources point to his will. It's this incredibly human document, and it shows this deep contradiction.
The biggest one of all, perhaps. Here's the man who provided the theoretical justification for the idea of natural slavery.
Which is a huge and deeply problematic part of his legacy.
Absolutely. And yet, in his will, he arranges for the remains of his first wife, Pythias, to be buried with his. He makes sure his second wife, Herpyllis, who was a former slave, is financially secure for the rest of her life.
And most incredibly, he specifically names several of his slaves and orders that they be set free, either when he dies or when his daughter gets married.
He even says the children of his servants must not be sold away from their families. The systematic thinker who classified all of existence was, in his final act, completely overridden by personal human attachment. His theory was cold, but his practice was compassionate.
The philosopher who organized the entire universe, but whose last thoughts were about love and duty to the people around him.
And if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, this is why Aristotle still matters so much. Those categories he came up with, the ones he got from grammar, substance, quality, quantity, they aren't just ancient history.
Right.
They're the tools that shape scholastic philosophy, scientific classification, and really, at a basic level, how we structure data and think even today. Anytime you break a concept down into its core components, you are, whether you know it or not, working inside the framework Aristotle built over 2,300 years ago.
So the ultimate takeaway is that we owe our ability to organize and speak about the world to a man who just listened very, very closely to how people talk. That's a phenomenal thought to end on.